yena bhutare swayam rupa karamayam darati swaparantikam. Narayanam namaskritam naram chaivaranottamam devam sarasatim vyasam tato jayodhira. Nishtapareshu bhadresu nityam bhagata seva bhagati uttamashoki bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Nigama kalpalagaritam param shukam makaramata dravisamitam pibata bhagatam rasamarayam mahora hora sikabhuvibhakaha. Krishna swadam bhagate dhammaganimha karonasta dushamasha parana kodunoditaham. Tvamapiya dabhisuta vishadam vibhusam yapirena vidamvidotsaram prapyahi duhomara samkleshana vanamusanti nanyataham. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutade Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Godavani Pacharine Nirvishesa Sunyavadi Praskita Desadharine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Good morning, Jimmy and Taruni. Thanks so much for joining us on Wisdom Wednesday. Good morning, Raleigh. Raleigh pointed out to me that the radio station, I remember I mentioned the power outage yesterday morning. That knocked our iskcon 1480 radio off the air, and our engineer hasn't got it back yet. So thank you, Raleigh, for reminding me, and thanks for joining us this morning. As you can probably see, we have another technical challenge here. It's never happened before. In weeks and weeks and weeks of using the virtual background, I've always been pretty much, my form, my sharup, such as it is, has always been pretty much front and center. Well, I have to tell you today, nothing's changed. The same lights are on in the room, same background, same settings, and yet for some reason, unknown for me, undecipherable to me, my form is much more ethereal today. It comes and goes. Parts of it disappear and appear. I have no idea why that's happening. I could probably solve the problem by eliminating the virtual background, but it's so much fun to come up with these different backgrounds and show you the temple while we're talking that I'm loath to relinquish our standard operating procedure for the last few months. But at the same time, I'm completely baffled as to know what's different, what's causing this patchiness in the presentation. If anybody has any ideas, we're on a Mac, by the way. Please let me know. All right. Thanks for joining us, Sundari Priya. And also, Jimmy Tooney, Justin. Thanks very much, Justin. Justin said that he's been listening. He stumbled across our, parentheses, my talks 9 years ago. So, and he's from Wisconsin, I think, or Michigan. I believe in Michigan. He's an engineer in Michigan. Good morning, Rupa Manjari. Thanks for joining us. I should say thanks for joining, like, whatever part of me happens to be visible on the screen at the present period of time, anywhere from 50% to 100%. Anyway, my voice will be here. You can count on the fact that between Wednesday and next Monday, I'll be racking my brains to see why this happened, what variable has been introduced to cause this kind of patchiness. In any case, it's all about hearing and less about seeing. So we're going to hear again some thoughts on the 43rd verse, 3rd chapter, 1st canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the 3rd day that we've revisited this verse, a key verse in the great Bhagavad Purana. The Sanskrit, maybe if I slide a little closer to help, not particularly. Krishna Swadam Upagate, thanks for joining us from UK, Jay. Sanjay, yes. Sanjay says the image disappears due to background colors. That's true, but it's never happened before. So why it's happening now, and that's what we have to figure out, folks. And I need your help here. All right. Krishna Swadam Upagate Dhammaganabhisha Karonasta Dushamasha Pananako Dunoditaham. This Bhagavad Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode. I can turn this light off, but it then makes me look a lot more weird, right? Looks more ghostly, and it doesn't really solve the problem. Yeah, I don't like that look at all. Yuck. Halloween's over. And I'm not that close to death. Good morning, Anjali. Please check your screen backdrop resolution. Screen backdrop. Is that on the Mac or is that within Zoom? Screen backdrop. I have no idea what that is. Screen backdrop resolution. Anyway, I haven't changed any settings since yesterday. Campfire Caru story. You guys are quite a crew out there, I'm telling you. Hare Krishna, John, thanks for joining us. This Bhagavad Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. Okay, I guess I just have no choice here but to just take it out altogether. And we'll try and figure out the technology between now and... Can you see me now? Poor snow photo. Poor snow photo. I don't know what that means. It's not even English. Poor, P-O-R, snow photo at this time of the year. Pedro just wants to show his whole body. I can understand that, knowing Pedro. I can understand that for sure. Okay. Anyway, here we are, pretty much in black and white. Prepared to hear, right, folks? It's all about hearing. And I'm talking to myself as well, reminding myself not to get derailed or distracted by the visuals because it's all about hearing. Yesterday, I started to tell you, our point yesterday, which carries over today, is the powerful transformative effects of reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, associating with devotees, taking prasadam, and chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And the case and the example I gave was my old friend, Pranjiban Popat from Los Angeles, when I was life membership director there in the 80s. My closest friend, whom I just hold very close to my heart even today, passed away a number of years ago, was Pranjivan Popat. Eventually got initiated by Lokanath Maharaj. And it is said, Yata Kanchanam Kamsam Rashabhina Tata Diksha Dvidhanina Dvijat Vamjayate. Dvija means second born. Diksha means duly trained up and initiated by a bona fide spiritual master. So let me tell you in more detail than I did yesterday about the amazing transformation that happened to my friend Pranjiman Popat. He was Gujarati, obviously. He had lived in Uganda for all of his life. He ran a restaurant in Uganda, which of course served beef and beer. Well, I don't know about beef, but anyway, it served meat, chicken, lamb, beer. And Pranjivan, short guy with a little mustache, pretty much bald, kind of pixish, always a smile on his face and a twinkle in his eye, and someone that you just warm up to within 30 seconds of meeting. He had that ability of making you think that he was your best friend. He did that for everybody, but he actually, I was so privileged that he was next to Chiman, whom he grew up with in Uganda, and was basically inseparable from. I was pretty much up there amongst his best friends. Now, he in Uganda, as I said, he had a restaurant which served everything, intoxicants, meat, and he himself was the life of the party. You can imagine, as the proprietor of his own restaurant, he would go from table to table, and there would be hilarity and laughter. People would, obviously it was an incredibly successful money-making machine because of Pranjivan's magnetic personality. That would be where it's happening, in Kampala, wherever it was located. Anyway, Idi Amin, the infamous tyrant monster, took power and then became envious of the Gujaratis, who are always good businessmen. They had all the prospering, thriving businesses in Uganda, and the local natives not so much. And so he kicked all the Indians out, confiscated all their money, hard-earned money, stole their businesses, and gave them a week to leave the country. One day, Pranjivan went to the bank to make a withdrawal, and the teller said, "Mr. Popat, I'm so sorry, but from the top, all your money's gone. All the government can do for you right now is get you a ticket to either England or America. And if you don't use the ticket and leave the country within a week, something terrible is going to happen." So everything was taken away. He decided to go to America. He ended up in Los Angeles with his family. He had 2 kids, Hitesh and Ashok. His wife is Manju. She's still there in Diamond Bar. Still keep in good touch with her. Visit her whenever I'm in the area. She loves to feed me. And Pranjivan has a grandson also who's, gosh, I think he's just about in college now. And of course, he had no money and everything. And so he started a little kiosk in the ground floor of the Transamerica Insurance Building downtown, just selling little knickknacks and all. And still drinking beer, presumably eating meat. I don't know about the eating meat part. He had served meat in the restaurant. I don't know if he was vegetarian or not. But one day he's coming home from work, going up the stairs to his apartment on Oxford Street in downtown LA, not a very good part of town, with a 6-pack of beer under his arm. And he goes to open his apartment door, and it opens from the inside. And lo and behold, there had been a devotee. I don't know how he got Pranjiva's name, because he'd never been to the temple. There was a temple in Culver City, maybe 10 miles to the west of downtown LA, which, as far as I know, Pranjivan had never visited. But Sri Govinda, the life membership director before me, had done his due diligence and found names of people, Indian people, and he wanted to introduce himself and invite them to come to the temple. And so he'd come earlier in the day to Pranjiva's apartment, talk to Manju. Manju said, "Have a seat. My husband will be home pretty soon." So Sri Govinda was sitting there for some time, 20 minutes, a half an hour. And he heard footsteps on the stairs. And so he decided he would open the door and welcome Pranjivan. So Pranjivan's walking up the stairs with a 6-pack of beer under his, thinking who knows what. And he reaches to open the door. Pranjivan's short, Sri Govinda's tall. You go open the door, and the door opens from inside. And then he sees the midsection of someone who has a dhoti, a robe on the bottom, and a kurta on the top. And as he looks up and up and up, and he sees the face of a devotee, the tilak, and he just is amazed. How did this apparition come to appear before him? So he went in. He was actually delighted. Later on, Pranjivan told me that in his village in Uganda, they had a temple. It was a nice temple. It was built from local donations. And people would go there and do pujas and all, but nobody really had a philosophical grasp. What was the purpose of puja? Who was the Supreme Personality of Godhead? What's the highest occupational duty? What's the best way to make our life most meaningful? None of that philosophy was there, just the shell, you might say, of the culture. So he talked to Sri Govinda. That was the last time that he ever drank alcohol. And if he'd been eating meat, he never ate meat again. And that night began an amazing transformation in the life of Pranjivan Popat. He very seriously took to chanting on his beads, like rosaries, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, on a regular daily basis. He had been selling burritos with chicken and meat in them. It came to a point where he'd been visiting the temple and hearing about the sinful effects of consuming meat or selling it. And there began to be this tension. Here I'm hearing at the temple about how sinful the meat industry is, and I'm getting income from that. And so there began to be a tension. And eventually he came to me and he said, "Caru," he said, I can't do it anymore. I can't sell burritos with meat in them. So I'm just from tomorrow or next week or whatever, I'm just going to go with bean burrito. That's the only option. And he said, "I don't have much income. It's a small kiosk. I don't have much income. I have rents to pay. I don't even know if I'll be able to support my family. He had been sending his eldest son to pharmacy school at University of Southern California. It was a great leap of faith, but he wanted to walk the talk. He didn't want to say one thing and do another thing. And so and later on he told me that when people would come to him, and he had many good friends, everybody loved Pranjivan. So all the office workers in the building, they just loved Pranjivan. They loved his smiling face. They loved everything about him. So Monday morning, I'll take a chicken burrito. And he says, we're not selling them anymore. Why not? And then Pranjivan would explain to each and every regular customer why it was a matter of conscience that he could no longer sell burritos with meat in them. And he told me later that people accepted it. They just respected his moral choice. And the amazing thing was that his business not only didn't go down, but it went up by 10%. Because people wanted to exchange with someone of integrity. They themselves were willing to pass on the occasional chunks of meat in order to support and celebrate Pranjivan with his moral stance, which was an interesting thing. So anyway, Pranjivan took Krishna consciousness very seriously, and as a result of that, an amazing transformation took place in the life of Pranjivan. Now, part of Krishna consciousness is to take what assets you have and use them in the service of Krishna. So Pranjivan had this asset of magnetism, of exuding warmth and compassion and sensitivity. He was the most people person I've ever seen. And so once he used that magnetism, not just to attract people to him, but to deflect their attraction from him to Krishna, from whom all assets, all talents, abilities come, he became a powerful force for good, or we should say transcendence, in the Los Angeles area. And of course, he had his influence among the Indian community, but he was one of those people, man for all seasons. Everybody loved him. Everybody loved him. I remember in the early days, before we built this temple, we had just the radio station, a log building, and we had the Festival of India on a smaller area than we do now, with a small stage backed up on the radio station building, a little hillside. And we get 600-700 people to the Festival of India. We have the drama of the Ramayana, we'd have the burning of Ravan, the fireworks and all like that. And in the end, we'd have a rock concert where everyone sing and dances and chant Hare Krishna. Obviously in Utah Valley, it's the youngest average per capita age because of the big families. So Utah Valley's, the mean age is the youngest of anywhere in America. And we've always had a young crowd at our festivals. So during the kirtan, usually it would be TK coming up from San Diego with his band, and they would be doing Hare Krishna rock kirtan. And Pranjivan, 3 or 4 times he came up from Los Angeles for the festival, and he would get up on stage. I was going to put a slide of Pranjivan on the screen today, but I got so distracted by the virtual background encroaching that I ran out of time. I was unable to do that, maybe some other day. But Pranjivan would get up on stage in front of the band facing 400 or 500 young kids, anywhere from 15 to 21. And Pranjivan, who was himself in his 60s and an Indian, a different generation, a totally different culture, totally different ethnicity, didn't have any trouble bridging that gap. I mean, no trouble at all. It was like love at first sight between those kids and Pranjivan. And Pranjivan would do the most outrageous things on stage, and the crowd would simply follow. It was just like a mirror reflection. Pranjivan would go to the left, and 400 kids, half his age, a third of his age, would go to the left, 10 steps to the left. And then Pranjivan would go to the right, and 400 kids would go. And Pranjivan would go to the back, and Pranjivan would go to the front. And then Pranjivan would go like this, and Pranjivan would go like that. At one time, I even saw he was on his back with his arms and legs up in the end like a beetle, keeping time to the music. 400 kids on their backs in the grass, arms and legs up like a beetle. They just loved him. They just loved him. And, they got this impression that everybody from India was like Pranjivan. They just thought Indians were effervescent and delightful, funny, outgoing, just like Pranjivan. And so I heard, stories about Indians who had young people come up to them, bounce up to them in public places in Utah and say, "Are you from India?" Just thinking that every Indian had the magnetism and attractiveness of Pranjivan. Pranjivan became a pure devotee within just a few years. He goes and it says, "Yatha diksha vidana dvija." Dvijatma means properly trained and initiated by a bona fide spiritual master. His Diksha Guru was Lokanath Maharaj. He had many Siksha Gurus. I like to think I had something to do also with his training in Krishna consciousness, but really it was him. It was his staunchness and his ultimate enthusiasm and eagerness. As I said yesterday, whenever you're with Pranjivan, he always would say, "Can we sit down and discuss the Bhagavad Gita for 5 minutes?" So there'll always be a Bhagavad Gita, and 5 minutes would turn into 10, 10 would turn into 15, 15 would turn into 20. Now, we talked about the art of hearing. The art of hearing is repetition. That verse that I quoted, it's alchemical. You do the same process over and 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 over again. You don't strive to change things constantly. You're not interested in new material, hearing something new. In fact, the more often you hear the same things, like Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you're not this body, the more advancement you make. Hearing it once or twice, it's fine. It's something new. It's exciting. Oh, it's another culture, another insight. But when you hear you're not this body the 150th time, you're making more progress than you did the first time, because you're following the discipline of hearing. You're following the yoga, the practice of hearing, and nobody was better than that than Pranjivan. We would be sitting in our little sloka, on our little circle, and we'd be discussing never was a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. And here's Krishna talking to his friend Arjuna and establishing the eternality of the soul. Not only God's immortality, but our immortality, because we are coming as parts and parcels from him. We have the same qualities as him. Like gold bangles have the same quality as the gold mine. So God's eternal, we're eternal. And that's a verse that we would have discussed hundreds and hundreds of times. And yet to Pranjivan, it was always fresh. In fact, the more often he heard it, it seemed like the fresher it got. He would go, "Oh, aha, And there was nothing like giving a class when Pranjivan was in the circle of the audience, because he would have all these exclamations points, these oohs and ahs. It was always new and it was always fresh to him. He and his friend Cheeman ended up raising funds and establishing the Radha Raman Temple in Yorba Linda, there on Bradford Street, and it still goes strong today. And Cheeman later on became initiated by Lokanath Maharaj as well. Perhaps we'll talk about Cheeman some other day. But, Pranjivan is interesting because there was a genetic defect in his family, and his brothers had all passed away in their 40s of heart attacks. So Pranjivan, of course, as a devotee, he ate very sparely, very simply, didn't eat meat and drink alcohol like presumably some of his brothers would have done. But at the age of, I think it was 64, and this is anywhere from 10 to 15 years ago, he went to a home program, and Pranjivan would never sit. He would always stand during the kirtan. He would always stand, and he would encourage kids and old people. And any kirtan at a home program in someone's living room that Pranjivan was at, you could pretty much bank on the fact that everybody would be up and chanting. So he went to a home program, and I have to tell you another story too. Just let me digress here. Gujaratis are very clannish, very social, They have a special connection. So they would have their parties with alcohol and things like that. And Pranjivan and his wife would go to the parties. And Manju got frustrated after some time, after Pranjivan became a devotee, and all he would talk about is Krishna. So Manju, one time, as I heard the story, went to Pranjivan after a party. She said, can you just try to blend in more when we go to these parties? And this is not chanting, this is not temple-related parties. This is just the opposite, social affairs. Manju said, can you not cause such a stir? You're always talking about Krishna. Now, these friends of ours and relatives, these are not Krishna-centered parties. They don't organize and invite everyone to talk about Krishna. They want to talk about politics and Congress Party and BHP and the latest Bollywood stars. And all you do is you talk about Krishna, and can you just not do that? It's okay when we go to the devotees' homes, but let's not do it when we go to the non-devotees' homes. So Pranjivana said, okay. And the next invitation, the next party came up. They went, large group of people through the house and everybody. And Pranjivan's trying his best to be mundane. Half an hour goes by, he hasn't said anything about Krishna. Hour goes by, he hasn't said anything about Krishna. Finally, the host nominates a delegation of 4 or 5 people to approach Pranjivan and say, Pranjivan, we know that sometimes you cause disruption, sometimes you cause controversy when you talk about Krishna, but we'd rather have you talking about Krishna than being silent. So whether everyone agrees or disagrees, the fact is that when you come to a party, you talk about Krishna, it is the most significant thing about the party, and we don't want to omit that. So please don't change your lifestyle. Don't stifle or muffle yourself. Be yourself. Do what you always do. Please, please, please talk about Krishna. So much for Manju's campaign of discretion. Anyway, at the age of 64 or so, and again, I said 10 or 15 years ago, he went to a party, he stood up, he got everyone dancing, chanting, went home, and that night he had a stroke. The result of which is that he lost his power of speech. It was, actually, this would have been about 62, the age of 62, because he passed away 2 years later. So for 2 years, he could not say you, me, I, mine, car, cat, house, dog. He couldn't say even simple words. What to speak of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Gaur, Premananda, Hari Hari Bo. He couldn't say any of that for 2 years as a result of the stroke. But he could say as clear as a bell, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So can you imagine that? For the last 2 years of his life, Krishna blessed him in such a way that the only words he could say were the 3 words of the Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna and Rama. And everybody knew it. So, any conversation that you'd have, such as it was with Pranjivan, would just be back and forth with the Maha Mantra. You could say whatever you wanted, but his response would always be Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This was Krishna's blessing on him, narrowing down the distractions, honing him in, preparing him like a surface-to-air missile to hit the target. Nate vidu shvartagadimi Vishnu darasye bahiramartamanina. So that he would be 100% focused on Krishna at the time of death and transfer himself back to home, back to God. Ante kali chamaviva shmaran mukpa kalevaram yapariati shamadbhamam yati natisha samsaya. So this art of hearing, this discipline, this yoga of hearing, was no more perfectly personified than in the person of Pranjivan Bopat. When I read this verse from the Bhagavad Gita, where in the 10th chapter, after Krishna has explained 3/4 of everything to be explained to Arjuna, most of the Bhagavad Gita is over, at least 2/3 of it, and Krishna has gone back and revisited several areas multiple times, and so and he's just explained some essential things about always chanting, always remembering the Lord, how the Lord is within the heart and will help one. And so Arjuna at this point doesn't say, okay, Krishna, we've covered all this. Can we take a break? Can we move on to something new? No, he says, Vishtarenat maro yogam vibhutim chadana bhuyo katar tripto hi srimbato nasti mebatam. I'm tripto. I'm getting so much pleasure, bliss from Srimvato, from hearing. Can you go over these same things, what you've spoken before? Can you revisit it in more detail? Please describe in detail the mystic power of your office. I'm never satiated in hearing about you, for the more I hear, the more I want to taste the nectar of your words. One can never be satiated if one has the right attitude, if one's making the moral decisions, the kind of moral decisions, lifestyle decisions that Pranjivan made with seriousness, and if one is practicing regular daily chanting Hare Krishna and eating only Krishna prasadam, which is offered to Krishna, if one consecrates the tongue to talk about Krishna and eat Krishna prasadam, and to earn one's living in the most non-violent, honest way possible, then one can never be satiated, even though one continuously hears the transcendental pastime of Krishna, who is glorified by excellent prayers. So after 2 years, then, of course, Pranjivan, he went to another home program. He got up, he danced, he chanted, he went home. In the middle of the night, he had a heart attack, and he passed away at the age of about 64. And I was part of the crew that dressed him in his last of garments. I put tilak on his forehead. There was a viewing. Relatives came in from all over the world. Gujaratis are everywhere throughout the diaspora. From Africa they came, from England they came. And next to the departure of Srila Prabhupada, that was the most heart-wrenching time of my life. But there was a lot of hopefulness there, a lot of light, a lot of reason to celebrate, because here was a person who just not more than 5 or 6 or 7 years ago had been mired completely in ignorance, addicted to various sinful activities. And because of his hearing properly and continuously, he wasn't a great scholar, he wasn't a great yogi. He was what you would call a common person, like most of us are. And yet in this age of Kali, this dark, materialistic age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the process for achieving perfection is available and accessible to anyone who will take it seriously. Pranjivan is the best example of that. He took it seriously, and he went from the darkness to the light. Om Jyotir, Om Tamashom Jyotir Gamaya, Om Asad Mad Sato Gamaya, Om Ritam Mad Amritam Gamaya, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The process of hearing and chanting in the Kali Yuga age is more than sufficient to get you from darkness to light, from ignorance to knowledge, from the temporary world of birth and death to the eternal spiritual kingdom of God. And we can hope, those of us who are left here in the wake of such great personalities like Maharaj Parikshit, Arjuna, Pranjivan, Prabhupada, and so many others. Vitaraga Vyakara Manmayaru Bhavagana Tapasha Puta Madhva Magata. Krishna says in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, many persons, not just 1 or 2, but many persons have achieved perfection through the process of hearing and chanting, and they have preceded us back to home, back to Godhead. Many persons. It's still not a cheap process. One has to be serious. One has to be conscientious and diligent. But there's so much bliss, there's so much fulfillment and satisfaction in making a serious commitment to pursuing spiritual knowledge and spiritual practices. Otherwise, any other topic that we might discuss, vibrate with this tongue, it's only going to reduce and cause the days and moments of our lives to be robbed. We're going to be bereft of our greatest asset, which is the time that we're gifted in this human form of life. The human form of life is distinguished from all the animal species of life because only in the human form of life can one think, who is God? Who am I? Where have I come from? And where am I going? One should discharge one's duties in the human form of life. One should exercise one's unique prerogative to become God conscious in the human form of life and make one's life successful. In the second canto of the Bhagavatam, Prashant, Ayarati Vaipam Sam Udyamastam Jana, Tasharati Yatsonanisha, Uttamashoka, both by rising and setting, the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone, except one who utilizes the time by discussing topics for the all-good personality of Godhead. Time marches on. Time devours all. Time is inexorable. Time and tide, it is said by the English poet, wait for no man. So the time indicated by the rising and the setting of the sun will be uselessly wasted if that time is not properly utilized for realizing spiritual self, spiritual values. Even a fraction of that time wasted for mundane topics cannot be compensated for by any amount of gold. The great philosopher and moralist in Chanaka Shloka 34, he says, Ayusho Shano Eko Pi, Na Labja Shranakotabi. Shranakotabi means millions and millions of gold coins. Shano Eko refers to one single moment. We have so many moments. I know the Moody Blues sang a song one time called 22,000 days. That's the average duration in the human form of life. Those 22,000 days are comprised of, I don't know how many hours, how many minutes, and how many moments. There's so many millions and millions of moments during the average human lifespan of 22,000 days. But even one of those moments, as many of them as there are, you'd think, oh, I have so many. I can afford to waste 100 or 1,000 or even 10,000. This verse contradicts that assumption. It says you cannot afford to waste even one. As many as there are, you cannot afford to waste even one. Why? Because even a moment, even a sano, a fraction of a second, is so valuable that you cannot get it back even by offering millions and millions of gold coins. Right now it is 8:09 Utah time. I can't, if I offer millions of dollars, I cannot make it even 8:08. What to speak of 8:07. I cannot turn back the hands of time. Therefore, there is no more valuable asset. You may be a street sweeper earning a minimum wage, or you may be Brazo, or the guy Facebook, Mark. But your most valuable asset, which we all have, and nobody can take this away from you. Only you can give it away, but nobody can take this away from you. The days, moments, and seconds of your life, they're meant for engaging in Krishna consciousness, following in the footsteps of the great authorities, making your life successful, and going back home, back to Godhead. So our message today is you're all millionaires, you're all billionaires, you're all zillionaires. Please don't waste the great assets that you have. Invest them in chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Associating with devotees, taking prasadam, and going back to home, back to God. Thank you so much. Prashad, right there with all the verses. Asato madsadgama avita ragabhya krodam, etam vibhutam yoga cha. Rupa Manjari, the art of hearing. There are a number of there are 32 more comments. Unfortunately, I can only see the top 4, but I'll review them afterwards. Sanjay Sharma, thank you for liking. Manasaganga. These are all the ones that clicked like. If you haven't done so and you thought that there was some merit in our presentation, please do partner with us and click like. Beyond that, you're welcome to make a comment. Love it if you could share this if you belong to any spiritual groups. Love it if you could share this with your groups. But the likes are Madhav Das. Madhav often comes in later and listens after the fact, but he's live with us this morning. Good morning, Madhav. Rakesh Raghav, thank you very much, Rakesh, for joining. Ram Kishore. Anjali, of course. Love you, Anjali. John Malik. Justin from Michigan. Sundari Priya. Raleigh. Jimmy and Taruni. Jean. And others. So this is your Prapana Bhat. Thanks, Prapana Bhat. This is your last chance to hit the like button, a thumbs up, or the heart button. Share. You can share it anytime that you wish. Please make comments as well. I will respond to each and every one of your comments. So I hope that we can cherish for this day. I don't know what the anniversary of Pranjivan's passing away was, but whatever the day on the calendar might have been, we can adopt the next daylight hours of this current day to think about that great soul who went so far in such a short time on the strength of devotional service, seriously engaged in and seriously committed to. Thank you so much. And with me, if you care to conclude our program by intoning the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.